There once was an argument in a church I was involved in. During a congregation meeting, someone asked why the steeple bell was no longer being rung before the service. This church had a wonderful steeple with a beautiful bell in it, and it was big and heavy. It took strength even for me to pull that rope and ring that bell. Now, of course, it was impossible for me to take this job over because I had other responsibilities most Sunday mornings. But honestly, I was glad not to have the job because I always had this irrational fear that pulling on that rope, that bell was just going to come clanging down, and I didn't want to be underneath it when it happened. But it was really important to some people that this bell be rung every Sunday. Yet no one wanted to do it anymore. One person said one thing, another person countered back and forth. Soon, the whole room was up in argument. 70, 80 people gathered, all yelling at each other, taking sides. The fight didn't end until one woman, who never speaks up on anything, claimed the floor and in tears talked about how much this church meant to her. In tears. Over a bell. There was another congregation I knew. One of the young mothers in this congregation had lost her husband in a tragic accident. She was left without a husband and 2 children to raise. The congregation instantly jumped into action. They organized people to provide food for the family so the family had fresh meals delivered to them every day for 2 weeks, and then twice a week for the next 6 months. And I'm sure that's not the only way this young mother received support, but think about it. They didn't say, we're going to help you for the next week or 2. They said, we're here for the long haul, to help you in the depth of your pain and to support you through it all. Which of these congregations embodied Christ's command? Second one. Just so you know, both these stories are from the same congregation, from the one I grew up in. Because we're Lutherans. And as Lutherans, we know that we always have the capacity to be sinners and saints, right? So maybe the question isn't whether or not we sometimes love or sometimes do bad. Maybe the question is more, which are we known for? You know, they will know you are Christians. That's a challenging question because everyone knows that one bit of bad press tends to cover up years of good blessings. But maybe we back up even a little bit further and just ask, are we known at all? You can't be known for anything if no one knows you. There's another congregation I know of, and this is not my home congregation. The leadership board, the council at this congregation was given an assignment of going around the community and the neighborhood businesses and asking them if they've ever heard of such and such Lutheran church. And if the people they talked to answered yes, the next question was simply, do you know where the church is located? And finally, they would ask what they knew about this church. You want to know the results of the survey? They kept within 2 miles of the church. No interviews beyond 2 miles outside the radius of the church. Something like 65% of the people they talked to had never heard of the congregation. Of those who had heard of it, less than half knew where it was, and most of them knew nothing about the congregation. I mean, it's a church, right? Jesus says, "By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love among one another." How are we doing in that regard? What do you think? How is Mount Zion doing following Jesus' command? When people visit Mount Zion, do they remark, wow, there's a whole lot of love in this place? When you talk about Mount Zion to other people, do they say, I've heard of that church, they're full of love there? Our new vision is everyone we meet comes to know themselves as a reflection of God's image, worthy of life and love. Do the people we meet, whether in this building or outside of it, walk away saying, I felt loved. Maybe we should simply start by asking, what is love? And to answer that question, we need to look at the most important part of the command that Jesus gave us. You see, my problem with the Lord's Prayer is that when we get to that line that says, forgive us just as we forgive, I hate that line. It bothers me. Like, the amount I'm forgiven is going to depend on how much I forgive others, and sometimes I'm not very good at that. But this commands the exact opposite. Jesus says, love one another just as I have loved you. Love one another just as I have loved you. Our love is planted in the bedrock of Christ's love for us. We don't earn God's love, we share God's love. We love to emulate the love that we've already received, the love of Christ. And what's that look like? What's that love? Well, think about how Christ loved. Like when he saw thousands of hungry people, and the thing he said is, we're going to feed them all today. When he saw someone who wasn't welcome in the community, he said, I'm going to heal her sickness. I'm going to go visit his house. I'm going to eat with that group. When he saw someone traveling to a well at noon, thirsty and alone, he said, she needs water, and I'll get her some water. When the wedding ran dry, he said, I'll provide what's needed to keep this party going. When those maniacs tore the roof off the house, and he said, oh, look, you have great faith. That's not the reaction I would have given at that point. You have great faith. I'll do what I can to help you. Like when the woman stole a touch of his cloak without permission, he said, woman, your faith has made you well. Like when he saw the man who was going to betray him, and he said, I'm going to wash his feet. I'm going to give my body and blood to him. I'm going to die to save people just like this man. When he saw the people who condemned him to death, and with his last breath, he said, Father, forgive them too. Forgive even them. What is love? Well, how has God loved you? Jesus says in the Sermon on the Mount, look at the birds of the air. They neither plant nor harvest, yet God cares for their needs. How much more so does God care for you? Or look at the flowers of the field. They neither labor and they only last a short season, yet God has clothed them with more glory than Solomon in all of his splendor. And how much more so does God clothe you in grace and love? How much more so must God love you? Jesus says, I give you a new commandment. You should love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also should love one another. Just as I have loved you, as I have loved you, as I will always love you. And by this, in a world where, as Tom said, everyone seems to be full of hate, by this, everyone will know that you are the disciples of God's love, that you are the disciples of Jesus, the embodiment of love. If you too have love among each other, know that you are loved. Know that you are loved. Seriously, know that you are loved. And share that love. Share that love with everyone you meet. Love them and make them wonder, why am I not hearing about this on the news? Why am I not hearing about this place on the news instead of all that other stuff? If this is how much the people of Mount Zion love me, I wonder, how much more so must God love me as well? Amen.